Okay, back to this. So you've got to say which one of the following describes the length of the growing season in a tropical rainforest climate. Well, it's 12 months because the trees, although they might have a flowering system, for the whole time the temperature and rainfall is such that plants can flower. And one species might flower on an annual basis, but some species will always be flowering at some point in the rainforest. It's 12-month growing season. Okay, layers of the tropical rainforest. This is dead straightforward. You've got your emergence or your capox as your example at the top. You've got your thick canopy layer, then you've got your under canopy, and of course your forest floor at the bottom. Okay, you'll notice there's only 2 marks there, so if you got one wrong, you ended up with 1 mark. Okay, so this is easier than it seems, this one. We're looking at pie charts showing deforestation in Borneo, a country, we know that's not right, in Southeast Asia between 1980 and 2020. So rainforest is coloured dark, and deforested is coloured light. Now we need to also follow that colouring when we do this. So we've got to complete it, and you'll see it's in percentages, and that those percentages add up to 100. Now some people wasted a lot of time here working out degrees, so you can see on here, look, it's already been marked out into percentages. Make sure the line you do with your ruler goes through that spot, and again exactly through there. They'll be checking for that. Don't shade it in like this. No, you must colour it in black as it shows you here. Okay. Right, so just 2 reasons why the rate of deforestation varies between countries. Notice this is about rate, so you can't say one country's got more rainforest than others. It's like kilometres squared per day or whatever, the rate of rainforest. So mining, if there is coal or oil suspected to be in the rainforest, then it might be being cleared more quickly. And of course we can give the example of Borneo there. Right, HEP, if it's got big rivers running through it that are suitable for HEP is being developed, then it's going to be being cleared more quickly. And of course we could give the example of the Bakun Dam there in Borneo. Conservation is the one that most people picked up on. If there's stringent and very strict conservation rules in place, a selective felling policy, for example, then it's going to be less destruction. Okay, and some people even went further and talked about debt for nature swaps, and said that if these debt for nature swaps are in place, then there's going to be less destruction as well. So just be careful with these, that you really do think about the question. You don't just write down the first thing that comes into your head. If there's more rainforest, it will there'll be more going. Think carefully. Okay, next question. Now, I think it's fair to say that this is a very, very, very tricky question. The question set is all about the nutrient cycle. It's okay, we can cope with this idea here, we've done this, but we've got some inputs and outputs here as well. We've got some complex vocabulary that would be good if we knew. So it says explain why this diagram is an example of nature's recycling system. So I think for me, you've got to explain, you've got to show how this shows recycling. There are some bits that don't show recycling, and that's these. So the inputs and outputs from the system. But the key thing I think here is that you can't just lift from the paper. So what that means is you can't just copy from the paper. The plants uptake nutrients from the soil. You can't just write that. Biomass litters, and the litter is decomposed to make soil. Because what you're doing there, you're just lifting, and that's not a very hard skill. So you've got to think about, right, what can I actually add to this diagram? So for example, in decomposition, what does decomposition? Fungi, like mushrooms, bacteria, okay? How do the plants uptake? What do they uptake? Nitrogen, okay, phosphorus, and they pull it up through their roots, okay? And then within this store, we can talk about the transfer from plants to animals through being fed. Now, this littering, we can also talk a little bit about the fact that in a rainforest, that we get lots and lots of littering because the leaves are falling all the time. You might say that in a deciduous forest, you get a lot of littering in autumn and winter, and so on. So I think that would get you 5 marks if you just added to this and explained how that shows recycling. It shows the nutrients going round and round the system. I think for your 6th mark, you need to bring in some of these ideas. So leaching is when the rain water takes the nutrients, okay, down into the soil, down deep into the soil, so that they can't be reached by the tree's roots. Okay, the parent rock, that's the rock that's down here, and if it's weathered, it becomes part of the soil. Okay, so a very, very difficult question. I would perhaps have done it in 3 points. So number 1, about the soil to the plants. Okay, number 2, perhaps the plants to the animals, because I'm adding to the question there. And number 3, perhaps the littering and the decomposition. And then if I was really going for my 4 marks, my 6 full marks, I would have said about the losses to the system. Losses and additions, inputs to the system. Okay, so there we go, that's how it's an example. Okay, but remember, this is a really, really tough question, so don't worry too much. Right, next one. Okay, so we've got our 9 marker here. So there will be a 9 marker in Living World, and it could be on tropical rainforest, or it could be like this one on cold environments. So we've got to choose our cold environment, and it says for your chosen environment, cold environments, assess the importance of management strategies used to reduce the risk of environmental damage. So this is another question about reducing the risk. Right, so content, first of all, what are we going to put in here? Well, this one is all about management strategies used to reduce the risk of environmental damage. So it's one big, sorry, I've gone wrong there. Command word is assess. Right, sorry, back to it. Command word is assess. So how important is it? How good is it? How bad is it? All right, assess the importance of the management strategy. So the focus is about the importance. How important are these management strategies? Your content is these management strategies and how important they are. So I've listed the 3 down here that we could talk about. Now our structure, I'm going to go for, because there are 3, I want to talk about these 3, so I could structure it like that, or I could structure on one hand, this is very important, on the other hand, this is less important. I've decided not to go with that this time because I don't think that any of the strategies are not important or are important. I think they've all got howevers and buts that we can put in. So I think I'll start with Alaska and the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline. I would say that it is really important because you're in such a fragile environment. Okay, I would talk about the animals, the caribou that need looking after, and the fact that they migrate, and that's why the pipeline is elevated. Okay, and I would say that that's really important. I would perhaps talk about the risk of oil spillage from earthquakes. Okay, and I would just say about the supports that move with an earthquake, and I would say that how important that is, because if there were an oil spillage in such a fragile environment, it would cause mass destruction. Right, Canada WWF. So this one is all about scientific monitoring of the populations of animals and plants in Canada, and I would say that this is really important because it means that you can make decisions based on scientific evidence about whether you should exploit or use an environment, the cold environment. Okay, now with the Antarctic Treaty, again, I would say that this is really important. I would say it's really important because nobody owns Antarctica, and we have to have one set of laws that are relevant there, and so it controls the destruction by tourists. Okay, controls that, so that's really important. That's one of the risks to environmental damage, but it also enables scientific research, which, just like the Canada example, enables us to reduce the risk of damage to these special environments. Okay, so quite a tricky one again, but again, you plan, you think about what you've learnt and how it relates to the question. Okay.